back, friends. Gabriel Kevin here. How are you today? Hope you're having a great, awesome day. And this is another installment. It's a quick one in my suite of music tutorials covering a wide range of producing, mastering, recording, and writing and mixing and all that stuff. All that great stuff. So this one today, if we can get right into it so we don't take up too much time here, is about rendering. So what is rendering? And there's all kinds of stuff you can do with that. So I just want to keep it simple, and then I would recommend, reading up on it in the manual, looking at other tutorials. But I just want to give a quick tutorial here on what is rendering. So using a vocal track here that I have in my song Wonderland, this has a bunch of effects going on in one plugin. So here we have down here, and I use for my vocals Nectar, which is part of the Isotope, Izotope family of plugins, which I tend to love. So let me open this up. I'm going to double click this Nectar on this first track, and it will open up the stuff that is going on. The stuff, I like that. The stuff, real professional and technical, that is going on this one vocal track, and I tend to do this pretty much on all my vocal tracks. So here it is, and this one plugin actually is a vocal plugin and has a vocal assistant here, so that can be reviewed in my plugin tutorial and I go through Nectar and how this all works. But anyway, if you look in this plugin, there's a lot of stuff going on, so which is cool. That's why Nectar is a great vocal processing plugin. I'll just give you this one thing. It's pretty intense in the processing of your CPU. So if you have a lot of vocals and a lot of nectars, and I love the name Nectar, and you had a lot of nectars, it's going to really start degrading your performance. So you got to be very careful with types of plugins like this that have multiple things in them, and the amount of CPU it's going to use. And that's part of what we're going to talk about today. So what do we have here? We have pitch, we have de-esser, we have saturation, EQ, compressor 1, compressor 2, dimension, reverb, delay. That's a lot of stuff. And some of these things are on, some of these things are off based on this little eye up here, but most of them are on. So this is a lot of processing for this one track. Now, you multiply that by the next vocal track, etc., because I will use Nectar on every one of my vocal tracks. And it can start eating up your CPU, and you can even get performance degradation if you have too many plugins and you don't have enough CPU. That's very important. You have to look at how much CPU you have versus how much processing you're using on your mixing or your mastering. Generally more in the mixing world because you have so many tracks, where in mastering you're really dealing with 2 tracks. So what's the point? What's the point? Well, the point is that degradation of your processing, your CPU. And then in Studio One, you can actually play a song and it'll stutter as it's playing. And then you can look down here where it says performance and see this little blue thing here. That is telling you how much CPU you're using at this point. Now, that's in the middle, kind of, and that's kind of cool, and it'll work fine. But if you start seeing this blue line going closer and closer to the right, especially if it has a little red thing at the end of it, you are peaking out your CPU. This can happen in Studio One. It can happen in Pro Tools. They deal with it, each one differently. There are ways to get around that with buffering and stuff like that. But let's assume you did all that stuff and you have it as efficient as possible and as much CPU and RAM that you have on your computer. Awesomeness, awesomeness, awesomeness. But you're still running into a problem. So what can you do? One thing you can do is you can render your plugins. You can render your plugins. What does that mean? Now I'm going to close this. And what that means is when you have a plugin like this as an insert across, and other ones all along your whole track list and mix, and look at, that's a lot of tracks, and there's a lot of vocals right there too. My vocals are in green if you don't know that. And what you can do is, instead of this, when you start playing the song, instead of every one of these plugins, they're actively doing something as you're playing, and that's what's eating up your CPU. So it's just actively, and if you have, the more you have, just think exponentially, it's just going to drag, drag, drag. And if that's happening, you can get around that by rendering. And rendering says, okay, instead of it being active while I play, and I'm using this in my own terms, so if you want to put in the comments, your thoughts about this and some other things about rendering, I'm just going to keep this pretty short and sweet. Instead of it being constantly running when you're hitting the play button, you can render it. And render means it's going to take, it's almost like it takes a picture of all those parameters that you just saw and all those settings and all those numbers and everything as a snapshot, and it will render it to the track, and this will become sort of inactive. It's still active on your track, but it has become, how do I put this, part of your track. So it's not really a plugin anymore. It's now part of the track. And therefore, it doesn't have to process constantly as it's playing. It's already there. It's embedded in the track. It's part of the track. It's done. Now, pros and cons. One, if you do that, you can't change the parameters anymore. So you got to be sure this is it. I'm not changing this anymore. Whatever plugin, it doesn't matter. And I render it. And you can render this in Studio One, Pro Tools, all of them. They all do it. And that will free up your CPU. So that's the pro. It frees up your CPU. The con is that you can't change the parameters. Okay, that's a decision you have to make based on your own computer, your RAM, your memory, and all that stuff. So anyway, this is just about how to do that. So interesting enough, in Studio One, it's not called rendering. It's called, I'm going to right click on this track. It's called transform to rendered audio. Okay, so the word render is in there, but transfer it to rendered audio. So this is by track basis. So if I click on that, a little dialog box comes up and it says the name of the track, lead vocal main, preserve real-time state. This says support retransformation to audio track with insert effects. Say that fast. Support retransformation. Retransformation. So this is transforming. So this is supporting the retransformation to audio track with insert effects. So when you do this transform, the insert effects are disabled because it becomes part of the track. If you don't click, I highly recommend to click that box, because if you don't, you won't be able to go back. And you want to be able to go back, because if all of a sudden I got to make a change, you can basically unrender it. Okay, so that's kind of important, I think, to do that. I'm sure it's eating up some kind of space and stuff like that doing that, but it's, just do it. I would think. And anybody can think of a reason not to do that, then fine. Now, what's this other stuff here? Auto tail, fixed tail. It says switch between automatic tail detection and fixed tail of given length. Well, what's a tail? Well, tail would be, if you look here in my song Wonderland on this lead vocal track here, right here at the end here where there's a vocal, and there's vocal through the whole thing, right? If you have a delay as part of your plugin effect, or you have a reverb, when you stop singing, it's like dun, 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 or dun, the reverb. And listening to me doing this is really weird. And that's the tail. So basically, the cursor has passed by the actual audio, and it's over here somewhere, but you can still hear the tail of the effect. You want to be able to check one of these because you want that tail to continue and do what it's supposed to do and have that kind of tail. So you can say auto tail and it'll figure out for you, or you can say fixed tail and you say how many seconds, and you can play with this and get to how far you want it to go. And that way you preserve the tail, because remember, it's rendered into the track, and this provides the ability for it to continue past the point of the actual audio as it would normally do if you didn't render it and it was active. Okay, so it's pretty straightforward stuff. I'm not gonna hit OK, because once you do that, then it will render it, and this will not be active anymore. Then, we can actually do it. So let's just do it. We'll hit OK, and it's saying file 1 of 53. Wow. Okay, so that's a lot of stuff. And it says time remaining 3 minutes and 29 seconds. Oh, it's going faster, 5 minutes and 24 seconds. So it's a lot of, now, the other thing that I have here is I have Melodyne going on here, and I have the Nectar going on here, and it is rendering everything because you're rendering everything on that track. You can't, it doesn't specifically say, what you're actually going to do. It's mostly your inserts here. So 7 minutes, I'm going to cancel this because it's going to take forever. So I don't want to do that. Only because I don't want to waste your time. So then the other thing you can do after you have rendered the plugins, you can then unrender it and it'll bring it back. But just remember to check that checkbox so that you can unrender it. Now, me, I don't personally like to render anything because it kind of locks you into something. And so to me, rendering something is like a last resort. I want my plugins to be active. I want everybody, we're working here, baby. And I want to be able to go in there and change it anytime I want to do it and stuff like that. So rendering will save you if you don't have a lot of processing time. So if that's happening to you a lot, whether it doesn't matter what DAW, if that's happening to you a lot, you really should start thinking about either increasing your RAM, and that's what I did. I have 32 gigabyte of RAM. I use a Mac Pro Tower 2012, and that was the year that it came out, and now they have the really, 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 really cool Mac, which is like $6,000 or something. But it can rule the world, You'll never run out of RAM, or never run out of anything, and it's really expensive. But, well, to me, it's expensive. But this works fine. And it had, I believe, 16 gigabyte RAM. It had 4 slots. And I upgraded that to, I think, 8 gigabyte chips, which gave me 32 gigabyte. And that's the max that this will do on this 2012 Mac. So I do get some degradation with all the nectars I have. And when you mix down, you can mix down in Studio One, and you can do it when you're doing the mastering too. You can mix down in real time, or you can mix down in not real time. And real time would be it's actually playing through the song and mixing it down, versus non-real time where it's doing it behind the scenes and it knows to do it, but it doesn't have to play through the song. So when I get some kind of degradation, when I have a lot of vocals in a song and I'm using Nectar because I love Nectar, my playback will start staggering with 32 gigabyte of RAM. Now, that's amazing, right? But it will. And so then I'll turn some things off, I'll do whatever I want to do, and then I'll come back and I'll turn them back on, and then I will mix down without real time, and there's no problem with that. It will do it totally fine. So be that it does that totally fine, and I don't have to do real time, which I never would anyway, then I don't have a problem with having that many nectars and that much processing. How do I know the nectar was the guilty one? Because there is a way in Studio One where you can show your plugins and what's eating up time. I'll try to do a tutorial on that, but there is a way to do that, and it shows you, and I can see nectar. All of my nectars are eating up all the time. And I'm like, it's you. It's only you. So what happens is I turn them off. You can turn them off individually. I hit the button here when I want to do something, and then I turn them back on, and then I'm fine. But I still have the problem with 32 gigabyte of RAM. Too much nectars, and in my new songs coming up, I have to figure out a way not to do that, and not maybe do more of a bus and one nectar and stuff like that. But anyway, that's just going really deep into stuff. So it's basically rendering helps you increase your CPU power because you are deactivating things and fixing them into the track. If anybody else has more information on rendering and stuff like that, you want to add and help other people out, because once you start hitting that wall of CPU running out, it's frustrating because then you can't add more stuff, and then it just becomes So, look at increasing your RAM, look at maybe a new computer. It depends on how many tracks you have and how many plugins and how intense those plugins are. Okay, that's enough gabbing with Gabriel today. Hopefully this was helpful, and it'll help you out no matter what DAW you're using. And if it's helping you out and you like other things on my channel, and the music and the literary and Radical Cathedral, because Gabriel is a radical bohemian hippie. So anyway, if you do, please subscribe. That helps me out too. And please like if you like it. And please, most importantly, is to share it, because I believe we're a community of artists and writers and mixers and people like that. And it's always greater when everybody else chimes in and helps each other out. And that is my goal. So hopefully this was great. Remember, subscribe, like, and share. And put your comments in, and let's share our ideas and things that we've encountered. And if you've encountered, CPU degradation, please, and you fixed it, put it in the comments. Let people know, really. So cool. Have a great, awesome day. Rock on. Rock on? He said rock on. Couldn't you say pop on or rap on? Why is it rock? I don't know.